Open with the sound of a taut, strong string or wire being plucked. It rings with a clear, vibrant, resonant note. Hold that note. Then, very faintly, introduce the sound of friction, a slow, almost imperceptible sawing. The resonant note begins to lose its clarity, developing a faint wobble, a whisper of dissonance. The sawing sound stops, but the note is now slightly off, diminished. A moment of silence. Then a single final ping as the string snaps. The voice begins, quiet and observant. It never starts with a scream. It starts with a sigh. We imagine disconnection as an event, a slammed door, a final fiery argument, a declaration of ending. But those are merely the moments when a long, silent process finally becomes visible. True disconnection, the kind that carries a deep and lasting cost, begins much earlier, much quieter. It begins in the unnoticed unraveling. Picture a single, strong thread. It connects you to someone, a partner, a friend, a family member, a community. It's the thread of shared intention, of mutual care. For a time, it is strong. It vibrates with contact, with conversation, with the energy of us. But then, life. The busy week. The minor annoyance you don't mention. The tired, "I'm fine," when you're not. You cancel the casual coffee because a work deadline looms. You let their text sit for a day before replying with a simple emoji. You sit in the same room, but your mind is on a screen in another world. Each of these is not a cut. It is not even a tear. It is a single microscopic filament within that thread, wearing thin through neglect. This is the drift. It is the quiet, incremental loosening of your grip. It is choosing the path of least resistance, which is almost always the path of least connection. It is the substitution of digital proximity for physical presence. It is the belief that because you still feel love or loyalty, you don't need to express it in the small daily currencies of time and attention. The most dangerous part of this stage is its comfort. The drift is often painless at first. It can even feel like freedom, less obligation, fewer demands on your energy. The silent space where conversation used to be can feel like peace before it curdles into loneliness. You are not fighting, so you assume you are okay. You are not arguing, so you assume the bond is intact. But a bridge untraveled does not stay strong. It gathers dust, its joints grow stiff, its purpose forgotten. This unraveling also happens within you. The thread connecting your present self to your deepest values, your creative spark, your physical health, can also fray through tiny neglects. Skipping one walk feels like nothing. Avoiding one difficult journal entry seems trivial. Choosing distraction over contemplation for one evening is harmless. But each skipped ritual, each silenced inner prompt, each choice for numbing over feeling, is another filament worn away. You are slowly, quietly, disconnecting from the person you intended to be. And because it's so quiet, we develop a vocabulary of excuses that masks the drift. We call it being busy. We name it needing space. We justify it as a season. These can be true, but often they are polite covers for a simple, uncomfortable truth. We are allowing the connection to lapse. We are not tending the fire, and we are calling the growing coolness fresh air. The cost at this stage is invisible. It is a deficit of future strength. Every unattended moment, every postponed conversation, every unexpressed appreciation is a withdrawal from the relational or spiritual bank account. The balance is shrinking, but no alarm sounds. You only discover the deficit later, when a storm hits, a crisis, a conflict, a moment of profound need, and you go to draw on the strength of that connection, only to find the account is empty. The thread, worn to a single frail strand by 1,000 small neglects, finally snaps under a pressure it was once built to hold. So how do we notice the unraveling before the snap? It requires a shift from passive coexistence to active noticing. It means listening to the quality of the silence between you and another. Is it a comfortable, peaceful quiet? Or is it a heavy, loaded silence full of unsaid things? It means checking in on your own inner state, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Do I feel like a stranger to myself lately? When did I last feel truly, deeply connected? The first step in stopping the drift is to admit the boat is moving, to hear the faint rasping sound of the rope against the dock, to feel the first almost imperceptible tug of current. The unraveling is subtle, but it is not silent. Not if you are truly listening. The sound of a single sustained mournful cello note emerges, holding the feeling of a realized absence. It hangs in the air. Voice. And as those threads fray, the very ground beneath our relationships begins to shift. What was once solid becomes unstable. This is the second, more painful cost, the erosion of trust. The cello note is joined by a low, unsettling rumble, the sound of earth slowly giving way. It fades. Open with the mournful cello note and low, unsettling rumble from the end of point 1. The rumble subsides, but the cello note bends and distorts, transforming into the sound of many small, delicate objects, like porcelain teacups or thin glass, tapping lightly against each other in a fragile, unstable stack. A tense, precarious silence follows, then the clear, sharp sound of a single cup cracking. The voice begins, measured and grave. Voice. That space created by the unnoticed unraveling, it doesn't stay empty. Something moves in to fill it. Not a deeper connection, but its corrosive opposite, doubt. And with doubt begins the systematic dismantling of the most essential element of any bond. This is the second, deeper cost, the erosion of trust. Trust is not a feeling, it is an architecture. It is the invisible latticework upon which we build the weight of our vulnerability, our hopes, our reliance on another human being. We think of it as a monolithic thing. You have it or you don't. But it is built, beam by beam, from countless small, consistent acts of reliability. And it can be dismantled the same way. The erosion begins with the devaluation of promises. A promise is a future fact spoken in the present. I'll be there at 7. I'll take care of it. We'll talk this weekend. In the state of connection, these are sacred contracts. But in the drift, they become malleable. They become aspirations rather than commitments. The time shifts. The task is forgotten. The call is postponed. Each time this happens, a small, load-bearing beam in the architecture of trust is replaced with a weaker material, the plywood of good intentions, which cannot hold the same weight. The person on the other end may say nothing. They may even say, "It's okay." But internally, a subtle recalibration occurs. Their nervous system, that ancient, wise guardian, learns. It learns that your word is no longer a fixed point on their map. It becomes a suggestion of where you might be. They stop building their plans, their emotional expectations, on the foundation of your promises. They begin to build contingencies. They start to carry mental umbrellas, just in case your reliability rains out. This leads to the second stage, the calculus of disappointment. Interaction starts to require energy it never did before. The other person must now calculate. If I ask this of them, what is the real percentage chance it will happen? Is it worth the emotional transaction cost of potential letdown? Spontaneity dies. The easy, fluid exchange of favors and support becomes a cautious, weighed negotiation. The relationship, once a place of rest, becomes a place of subtle, exhausting management. You have forced them to become the project manager of your connection, tracking deliverables of your basic presence. And then comes the most painful symptom, the walk on eggshells. When trust erodes, truth becomes dangerous. If you cannot trust someone to handle a small promise, how can you trust them to handle your fragile heart, your shame, your confusion? The big, true, messy things get locked away. Communication narrows to the transactional and the superficial. How was your day? Fine. The fine is a barricade. It says, the cost of explaining the real answer, of your potential distraction, dismissal, or unreliability with my feelings, is higher than the benefit of being seen. You have, through 1,000 small neglects, made yourself an unsafe harbor. And in an unsafe harbor, no ship will unload its precious cargo. But this erosion is not only relational, it turns inward with devastating effect. This is the corrosion of self-trust. Every time you break a promise to yourself, to rest, to create, to eat well, to hold a boundary, you are eroding your own inner architecture. You are teaching yourself that your word has no authority, that your needs are not reliable. A voice inside grows louder. Why set the alarm? You'll just snooze. Why start the project? You'll just quit. Why believe in your own capacity for change? You've let yourself down before. You become a stranger to yourself, governed by the whims of the moment, because the governing body of your own will has lost all credibility. The landscape of a relationship, or a life, where trust has eroded, is a flat, dry, suspicious place. It is devoid of the elevation of faith. Every step is taken carefully, scanning for cracks. Laughter is thinner, because joy requires the surrender of full presence, and presence requires safety. Plans are smaller, because grand visions require mutual, unshakable support. The terrible irony is that the person causing the erosion often feels a bewildered resentment. Why are they so distant? Why so cold? I didn't do anything wrong. But you did. You did nothing. And in the realm of trust, nothing is not a neutral act. It is a corrosive one. Consistency builds. Absence decays. You weren't actively malicious. You were passively erosive. And a river can carve a canyon not through violence, but through mere persistence. Recognizing this erosion is painful. It requires looking at the cracks in the foundation you may have helped create. But to see it is to reclaim agency. It is to understand that trust is not a gift given once, but a structure maintained daily. And its repair does not begin with a grand declaration of change. It begins with the next small, keepable promise, and then the one after that. It begins by becoming once more a person whose word is a fact, whose presence is a certainty, and whose attention is a sanctuary. The sound of the delicate tapping cups returns, but now a slow, steady, strong rhythm emerges beneath it. The sound of a careful hand placing one solid wooden block atop another, building something simple and stable. The tapping fades, leaving only the strong, rhythmic construction. Voice. As the external architecture of trust weakens, the internal self begins to lose its shape. Without the mirror of connected relationship, who are we? This is the next deeply personal cost, the disintegration of self. The sound of building stops. A long silence is broken by the sound of a mirror slowly cracking, a single fissure snaking across its surface. It holds. Open with the sound of the mirror cracking from the end of point 2. Let it hang, a stark, singular snap. Then from within that crack, a sound emerges. A lone voice singing a simple, pure melody. It is beautiful but isolated. After a few notes, a second voice should join, harmonizing perfectly, a duet. Then a third and a fourth, until a rich, complex choir is woven together, the original melody now part of something greater, supported and enriched. Hold this beautiful harmony for a moment. Then begin to remove the voices one by one. The harmonies thin. The supporting parts vanish, until only that original lone voice remains again, now sounding fragile, exposed, and slightly off-key without the others to hold it to the tune. It falters and stops. The voice begins, softer now, turning inward. Voice. When the threads to others fray and the ground of trust grows unstable, something fundamental begins to happen within the fortress of the self. We are not monoliths. We are, in many ways, communities of one. Our sense of who we are is not forged in isolation, but in the reflective gaze of others, in the friction and harmony of relationship. To drift from connection is not merely to lose companionship. It is to initiate a quiet, terrifying process, the disintegration of self. Think of your identity not as a carved statue, but as a living, flowing tapestry. The threads are your experiences, your values, your memories, your capabilities. But a tapestry needs a loom. It needs a frame to hold the tension, to give the pattern its shape and integrity. Our relationships, the deep, formative bonds with family, friends, mentors, community, are that loom. They hold the tension. They provide the frame. They reflect the pattern back to us, saying, "This is who you are. I see you." Without that loom, the tapestry sags. The pattern blurs. The threads tangle. The first loss is the loss of mirroring. We see ourselves most clearly in the eyes of another. A friend's laughter at our humor confirms we are funny. A partner's comfort in our embrace confirms we are safe. A colleague's respect for our insight confirms we are competent. This feedback is the gentle, constant polishing of our self-concept. In deep disconnection, the mirrors are covered, or they only show us our own lonely reflection. Without that external reflection, our sense of self becomes a guess, a rumor we tell ourselves. We can inflate into grandiosity, "No one understands my genius," or shrink into worthlessness, "I am invisible, irrelevant." Both are distortions born of a single, unreflected image. Then we lose the corrective feedback of friction. Smooth relationships are not always the most truthful ones. It is in the gentle disagreement, the challenged assumption, the loving critique, that our rough edges are sanded. A trusted friend saying, "That wasn't like you," or "I think you're seeing this from only one side," is a gift of clarity. It keeps our inner narrative honest. In the echo chamber of self that isolation creates, our thoughts bounce back to us unchanged, amplified, and increasingly distorted. A minor grievance becomes an epic betrayal. A small failure becomes a life sentence. Without the friction of another perspective, our internal world becomes a funhouse mirror, and we are the only one inside, believing the grotesque shapes we see are real. This leads to the most profound loss, the unraveling of the shared narrative. We are storytelling creatures. Our lives make sense as a story, and for most of that story, we are not the sole author. We are co-authors. The chapters are titled with others. The college years with Alex, building a home with Sam, the team that stood together. These shared narratives give our individual experiences meaning, context, and continuity. When we drift into disconnection, those co-authored chapters end. The narrative fractures. We are left trying to author a story alone, but a story with only one character is not a journey. It is a soliloquy. It becomes a lonely tale of I, without the transformative encounters of you and we. The plot grows thin, repetitive, circling around itself. We lose the sense that our life is part of a larger interconnected story, and that loss is a form of spiritual homelessness. Internally, this disintegration feels like hollowness, a buzzing, static uncertainty. You may look in the mirror and not recognize the intention behind the eyes. Decisions become agonizing, because the internal committee that once debated informed by the voices of those you trusted, is now a ghost town. You ask yourself, what should I do? And the only answer is the echo of your own voice, which you have begun to doubt. This is the atrophy of the relational self. The muscles we use to engage, to compromise, to love, to confront, they weaken from disuse. We become spiritually flabby, emotionally deconditioned. We try to fill this hollow self with noise, with consumption, with frantic activity, or with the curated personas of digital life. But these are costumes, not substance. They are echoes of identity, not the voice itself. The cost is a profound loneliness that is not about being alone, but about being unknown, even to oneself. It is the terror of the actor who has forgotten their lines, abandoned by the cast, staring into a dark and silent audience. The disintegration is slow, but its hallmark is a creeping sense of unreality. The world feels two-dimensional. Emotions feel muted or strangely exaggerated. You are becoming a rumor of a person, a story told by a single, increasingly unreliable narrator. The lone voice attempts its melody once more, but it wavers, cracks, and dissolves into a confused hum. This hum is then joined by the sound of low, murmuring whispers, many of them, all similar, overlapping, creating a muffled, oppressive noise. It is the sound of a single thought, amplified and trapped. And in this hollowed-out self, a new, dangerous dynamic takes hold. The isolated mind turns in on itself, and the echo becomes a roar. This is our next critical stop, the echo chamber of the self. The whispering rises, forming a single, looping, obsessive phrase. Is this all there is? It repeats, growing slightly distorted with each repetition, before fading into a tense, buzzing silence. Open with the tense, buzzing silence from the end of point 3. It's a sterile, electric hum. Then, from within that hum, a single, clear thought emerges in a whisper. They don't really care. It echoes once, twice. Then another thought layers on top. You're failing at this. Then another. Why even try? The thoughts are all in the same voice, your voice, but they are disconnected, repetitive, and they begin to overlap, speeding up, swirling into a cacophony of self-contained noise. Just as it becomes overwhelming, it cuts to dead silence. The voice begins, clinical and concerned. Voice. In the hollowed-out space left by disconnection, a new tenant moves in. It is the unchallenged, unedited, and increasingly tyrannical voice of your own thoughts. Without the interrupting grace of another's perspective, without the soothing rhythm of shared conversation, the mind turns in on itself. It doesn't just think, it broods. It doesn't just reflect, it amplifies. This is the dangerous architecture of the echo chamber of the self. Imagine a room with walls made entirely of mirrors. You are the only person in it. Every thought you have, every fear, every grievance, is reflected back at you, not once, but infinitely, from every angle. There is no window to an outside reality, no other voice to say, wait, look at it this way. In this chamber, your thoughts are not examined, they are reverberated. A minor slight becomes a pattern of universal betrayal. A single setback becomes proof of a cursed life. A passing anxiety becomes a solid, unquestioned truth. The echo chamber doesn't create new thoughts. It takes the ones you have and deepens their grooves until they become ruts you cannot climb out of. This is the stage where disconnection becomes cognitive distortion. The mind, starved for external data, begins to feed on itself. It's a closed system, and like any closed system, it moves toward entropy, toward chaos, distortion, and toxic waste. You are both the prisoner and the warden, the speaker and the only audience, and the feedback loop is absolute. The first law of the echo chamber is the magnification of the negative. The brain has a natural negativity bias. It's a survival tool meant to spot threats. In a healthy, connected state, This bias is tempered. A friend helps you reality check. Yes, that comment was rude, but remember, she was stressed about her job. But in isolation, there is no tempering. The negative thought is taken at face value, then re-examined, then refelt, then amplified. A critical email isn't just feedback, it becomes a searing indictment of your entire professional worth. A quiet evening alone isn't just peace, it becomes evidence of your fundamental unlovability. The volume knob on your inner critic is turned to maximum, and there is no one to gently lower it. This leads to the second, more insidious process, the creation of a personal mythology. In the absence of shared relational reality, you begin to construct a story where you are the sole central character. And in this story, you are often either the perpetually wronged hero or the uniquely cursed victim. Every interaction is filtered through this myth. A friend's lapse in communication isn't because they're busy. It's a deliberate chapter in the epic of how everyone leaves me. A personal mistake isn't a human moment to learn from. It's a crucial plot point in the tragedy of the one who could never get it right. This mythology feels deeply true because you've written it, directed it, and starred in it, with no other actors to challenge the script. It becomes your entire reality. But the most debilitating effect is paralysis by analysis. The echo chamber is a place of endless circular deliberation without decision. You think about calling someone, but then you think about why you haven't, and then you think about what they might think, and then you rehearse the conversation, and then you decide it's too late, and then you feel guilty for not calling, and then you resolve to do it tomorrow, restarting the cycle. This is the mind running on a treadmill. It is exhausting, energy-burning work that produces zero forward motion. Real connection requires action, a reach, a word, a risk. The echo chamber replaces action with relentless, futile simulation. It convinces you that by thinking about connection, you are engaging in it, when in fact, you are building a prison that keeps you from it. This state is not just sad, it is psychologically hazardous. It is the fertile ground for severe anxiety, because every fear is validated by the echo. It is the incubator for depression, because the narrative is one of hopelessness and isolation. It twists humility into self-loathing and introspection into self-obsession. And the cruel trick? The echo chamber feels like insight. It feels like deep, profound self-knowledge. I'm just facing hard truths about myself and the world, you tell yourself. But these are not truths weathered in the climate of shared reality. They are hothouse flowers, grown in the controlled, artificial atmosphere of your own isolation. They are fragile and distorted. Breaking out of the echo chamber requires one brutal, courageous act: puncturing the seal. It means allowing a draft of external reality to rush in. It can start infinitesimally small, saying one true thing to another person. I've been feeling really isolated. Reading a book that challenges your worldview. Listening to a podcast where people discuss their own struggles, realizing your thoughts are not unique. Seeking therapy, the ultimate structured interruption of the echo chamber, where a trained professional holds up a mirror that reflects back not just your own image, but clarity, perspective, and compassion. The echo chamber is the cost of disconnection paid in the currency of your sanity. It is the mind eating its own tail. To stop it, you must reach for a handhold outside of yourself. You must accept that your own thoughts, in isolation, are not the arbiters of reality. They are just one voice, and they are desperately lonely for another to answer back. The swirling thoughts return, but this time a new sound. The clear, resonant ring of an old-fashioned telephone cuts through the noise. The thoughts stutter, hesitate. The phone rings again, persistent, an external signal. The noise of the thoughts recedes into the background, now just a murmur behind the ringing, which is a lifeline of connection. Yet, This inward spiral doesn't just harm us, it fundamentally alters how we see and treat others. As our inner world hardens, so does our outer gaze. The next cost is a moral one, the atrophy of compassion. The phone ring fades, replaced by the growing distant sound of a crowd. Many voices, but muffled, indistinct, and ultimately ignored. Then the stark, chilling sound of a single door being firmly closed, then locked. Open with the stark, chilling sound of a door being closed and locked from the end of point 4. The finality of the lock click hangs in the air. Then a new sound begins. The slow, steady drip of water freezing into ice. Each drip hits and immediately solidifies with a sharp, crystalline ping. This builds into a field of frozen sounds, brittle, hard, cold. Underneath, the muffled crowd from before is still there, but now it sounds even more distant, like voices heard from inside a sealed vault. The voice begins, somber and grave. The echo chamber does its work. It turns us inward, until our own thoughts are the loudest thing in our universe. But this inward turn has a devastating outward consequence. It doesn't just isolate us, it transforms how we see the people on the other side of the glass. The heart, unexercised by empathy, begins to stiffen. Its capacity to feel with another atrophies. This is the moral cost of disconnection. The atrophy of compassion. Compassion is not pity. Pity looks down on suffering from a safe distance. Compassion is the courageous act of feeling alongside. It requires a porousness of the heart, a willingness to let the reality of another's pain resonate within your own being. But this porousness is fragile. It is maintained by practice, by the daily mundane acts of listening, of witnessing, of saying, "Tell me more." Disconnection is the cessation of that practice. It is the soul's equivalent of putting a limb in a cast. Without the movement of engagement, the muscles of empathy weaken, stiffen, and eventually forget their purpose. The first sign of this atrophy is the abstraction of the other. When we are deeply disconnected, people cease to be complex, breathing universes of hope and fear. They become categories. They become the opposition, the needy, the insensitive, the crowd. A homeless person is no longer a man with a name and a story that led to a park bench. They are a homelessness problem. A colleague who frustrates us is no longer a woman battling private anxieties. She is a difficult personality. This abstraction is a psychological defense mechanism. It is too costly, too overwhelming, to feel the full weight of every human story. So we simplify, we reduce. We file them away under a label, and in doing so, we silence their humanity, and we silence our own capacity to respond to it. This abstraction fuels a second, more toxic state, the calculus of deservedness. In the disconnected mind, compassion becomes a transaction to be calculated, not a reflex of the heart. We start to subconsciously audit suffering against merit. Do they deserve my empathy? Did they cause their own problems? Are they one of us or one of them? This is the echo chamber's logic applied to human value. It creates a world of justified indifference. We scroll past tragedy in the news because we've judged the victims too far away, too different, or somehow complicit. We withhold kindness from a struggling family member because we've tallied their past mistakes. The heart, meant to be an organ of unconditional connection, becomes a cold accountant of conditional care. From here, it is a short step to the numbness of overload. We live in an age of globally broadcast suffering. A tsunami here, a war there, a crisis everywhere, all delivered to the palm of our hand. For the connected heart, this can lead to compassionate action. For the already disconnected heart, it leads to empathy fatigue, which is really just a polite term for emotional shutdown. It's not that we don't believe the suffering is real. It's that our system for feeling it is broken. We have self-administered an anesthetic. the constant drip of horror, met with our own sense of powerlessness and isolation, triggers a psychological circuit breaker. We go numb to protect the last shreds of our own feeling. But the cost is that we become bystanders to the human condition. This atrophy culminates in a profound, soul-sickening state. The inability to receive compassion. A heart that has forgotten how to give inevitably forgets how to receive. When kindness is offered, it is met with suspicion, cynicism, or a wall of deflecting humor. Why are they being nice? What do they want? The muscle that should open to accept care has atrophied so completely that it cannot relax. This may be the loneliest cost of all. It creates a force field of isolation that repels the very medicine that could heal the disconnection. The person becomes starving at a locked banquet, unable to turn the key they themselves hold. We see this on a societal scale. Polarization, xenophobia, the cruel rhetoric of us versus them. These are not just political stances. They are the symptoms of a collective atrophy of compassion. They are what happens when millions of echo chambers reverberate with the same dehumanizing abstractions. The disconnected individual becomes the building block of a disconnected and thus callous world. But this atrophy is not irreversible. Muscles can be rebuilt. It begins with micro acts of re-engagement. It is choosing to look the cashier in the eye and ask how their day is, and really listening to the answer. It is pausing before you dismiss someone online and writing, "Help me understand your perspective," instead of a cutting retort. It is volunteering for 1 hour at a shelter, not to save the world, but to be in the same room as a suffering you've only abstracted. It is, quite literally, practicing compassion as a discipline, a rep for the soul. You are retraining your heart to see a person, not a problem, a story, not a statistic. This is how we begin to thaw the frozen chamber, not with a blast of sentiment, but with the slow, steady warmth of deliberate, focused attention on one other human being at a time. The sounds of freezing ice are interrupted by a single, strong, resonant crack, like a thick sheet of ice breaking. Then, the gentle, persistent sound of flowing water emerges from beneath it. The muffled crowd sounds sharpen slightly, becoming a single, clear voice saying, "I understand." Yet this moral and emotional desolation points to an even deeper void. When we are disconnected from others and from our own compassion, we inevitably confront the silent, empty sky of our own existence. This is the ultimate landscape of drift, the spiritual desert, the sound of vast into the barren desert. A lone, dry wind moans across a plain. It is a sound of immense, hollow space. The sound of quick meeting point introduced the soft, shifting sound of sand grains trickling down a dune, a sound of slow, dry erosion. It is a landscape of absence. The voice begins, hushed and expansive, as if speaking from within this emptiness. There is a place the soul can reach, where the disconnection is total. It is not just from others, or from the better parts of yourself, or from compassion. It is a disconnection from the source itself, from meaning, from purpose, from the sense that you are part of a story larger than your own lonely narrative. This is the ultimate cost, the final landscape of drift, the spiritual desert. The desert is not a place of violent suffering. It is a place of absence. The heat is not a fire, but a relentless, draining exposure. The silence is not peaceful. It is a vacuum. Here, the echoes of your own thoughts have finally faded, because even they have grown tired of their own sound. What is left is a profound, echoing stillness, a spiritual flatline. The first thing you notice in this desert is the evaporation of meaning. Meaning is not a thought you think. It is a feeling you experience when you are connected to a person, a mission, a community, a sense of the divine. It is the resonance between your life and something beyond it. In the desert, that resonance stops. Your work becomes a series of tasks. Your relationships become roles you play. Your rituals, prayer, meditation, art, become empty motions, like shaking a broken compass. You look at the stars and feel nothing but their cold, astronomical distance. You ask, "What is this all for?" And the only answer is the dry rustle of the wind. This is not depression, though it may walk with it. This is existential nakedness. You are a creature stripped of the stories that once clothed your existence in purpose. With meaning gone, the silence of the sacred becomes deafening. For many, connection to others is woven with a connection to something transcendent. Call it God, the universe, spirit, love. This connection is often felt through community, through service, through shared awe. As those human threads fray, the transcendent thread often frays with it. Prayer feels like speaking into a dead line. The scripture or poetry that once stirred you now reads like dry ink on a page. The desert is ruthlessly secular. It reduces everything to bare, unadorned fact. You are here. The sand is there. The sun beats down. There is no hint of a shadow from a winged comfort, no whisper in the wind. It is the world without its soul. In this exposed state, existential anxiety becomes your constant companion. Not the anxiety of a specific threat, but the free-floating, pervasive dread of a creature that knows it is finite, alone, and seemingly insignificant. The questions that busyness and connection once kept at bay now march to the forefront of your mind, unopposed. What happens when I die? Does my life matter? Is there any point to this struggle? In the connected life, these questions are held in the gentle container of shared humanity. We all wonder, and we wonder together. In the desert, you wonder alone. The questions become terrifying because there is no hand to hold, no voice to say, "I'm afraid too." The anxiety is the vertigo of infinite empty space. Paradoxically, the desert often breeds a final, desperate idyll of self-sufficiency. This is the soul's last mirage. You declare, "I am enough. I don't need anyone. I will be my own God, my own source." You build a proud, small shelter of total independence. But it is a shelter in a sandstorm. The self is too small a universe to sustain a human spirit forever. To worship at the altar of your own independence in the desert is to drink salt water. It promises quenching, but only deepens the thirst. The mirage shimmers, beautiful and cruel, always just out of reach, because the truth it denies is the fundamental truth of our being. We are wired for connection, not just as a preference, but as a need. To be totally disconnected is to be, in a spiritual sense, dying of thirst while standing in an ocean of sand. But, and this is a vital but, the desert, for all its terror, has a sacred function. It is the great clarifier. It strips away everything that is not essential. All the false identities, the performative relationships, the borrowed beliefs, the numb habits, they wither in this heat. What is left, if you can bear to look, is the bare, stripped-down core of your being, your authentic thirst, your true longing. The desert does not create this longing, it reveals it. It shows you with brutal honesty what you have been trying to fill with noise, with people, with achievement, with distraction. It shows you the God-shaped hole, the love-shaped void, the purpose-shaped hunger. This is why the desert, in every spiritual tradition, is not just a place of punishment, but a place of pilgrimage. The prophets go to the desert. The mystics go to the desert. Jesus went to the desert. They go not to find comfort, but to find truth. The desert forces a choice, to let the thirst kill you, or to let it define you. to let it become the single burning question that guides you out. The first step out of the desert is not a dramatic rescue. It is the acknowledgement of thirst. It is the humble, broken whisper, "I am parched. I cannot do this alone." This admission is the crack in the idol of self-sufficiency. It is the moment you stop praising the mirage and start searching with desperate eyes for any sign of real water. That whisper, that admission, is the turning point. It is the soul reorienting itself. It is the understanding that the cost of disconnection has become too high to pay, and that reconnection, however difficult, however humbling, is the only path back to life. The dry wind and shifting sand continue, but now, underneath it, a new sound emerges. The faint, almost imaginary sound of water dripping. Slow, irregular, but unmistakable. It is a sound that changes everything. That faint sound of water in the desert is the signal that the cost has been counted and the journey back can begin. But how? After so much drift, how do we find the path to the oasis? Our final exploration is the most hopeful of all, finding the way back, the courage to reconnect. The dripping water grows slightly more distinct and is joined by the soft, tentative sound of a single footstep on hard-packed earth, a step taken with intention in a new direction. The desert wind begins to fade. The single footstep on hard-packed earth from the end of point 6. Then the faint, hopeful drip of water. Hold these two sounds, the step and the drip, as a delicate duet. Slowly, another footstep joins, then another. The rhythm becomes a slow, deliberate walk. The dripping water becomes a trickle, then a steady, gentle stream. The harsh desert wind is gone, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves and distant birdsong. The voice begins, not with triumph, but with gentle, resolute hope. The desert has shown you the cost. The thirst has been named. Now, a single, terrifying, beautiful question remains. Do you turn and walk toward the water? The journey out of disconnection is not a sudden rescue. It is a pilgrimage back. It requires a courage different from the courage to endure solitude. It is the courage to reconnect. And it begins not with a grand reunion, but with a humble, vulnerable turn. The first step is the hardest, because it is an act of humble reorientation. It is admitting you have been walking in the wrong direction. It is stopping in your tracks, feeling the vast emptiness, and whispering, even to yourself, "I am lost." This humility is the essential fuel for the return journey. Pride will keep you parched in the desert, building monuments to your own self-sufficiency. Humility allows you to kneel, to look for the subtle signs of life you were too proud to notice before, the cracked earth where a root might be, the faint scent of dampness on the air. It is the decision to let the longing for connection guide you, more than the fear of rejection or the memory of hurt. With that reorientation, you begin the slow walk. And the walk is built on micro-actions of reach. You do not begin by trying to rebuild the entire crumbled city of a relationship. You begin by placing one stone. You send the text that says, "I was just thinking of you. No need to reply." You make the eye contact and hold the door open. You speak one true, unvarnished sentence to someone safe. "I've been feeling really disconnected lately." You pick up the forgotten journal and write one line. "Today, I want to feel connected." These actions feel absurdly small against the vastness of the drift. They are. But they are also directional. Each one is a footfall pointing toward, not away. Each one is a signal to your own soul and to the world. I am choosing to move toward connection now. As you walk, you must actively seek the corrective mirror. Remember the echo chamber, the funhouse mirror of self? You must now find true mirrors. This means placing yourself in the path of gentle, honest feedback. It might be a therapist's office. It might be a trusted, wise friend you ask, "How do you see me right now? What am I missing?" It might be joining a community group, a book club, a volunteer effort, not with the pressure to make a best friend, but with the simple intention to be around people whose reactions, whose very presence, will reflect back a reality different from your own distorted narrative. It is allowing your story to be gently edited by others. This path will inevitably lead you to the ruins of neglect. You will arrive at the places where connections have frayed or snapped. Here you must practice the hardest discipline, the courage to stand in the wreckage without immediately rebuilding. This means approaching the person you've drifted from not with a grand plan or a loaded apology, but with simple, non-demanding presence. It might sound like, "I know we've drifted. I miss you. I'm here, and I'm listening." It is offering your attention as a gift with no strings attached. It is allowing the space for them to express the hurt your absence may have caused. This is excruciating, because it requires you to hold the cost of your drift in your hands, to feel its weight, without rushing to justify or fix it. True reconnection is not a bypass around the pain. It is a path that goes straight through it, together. Throughout this journey, you must tend the inner well. You cannot offer connection from an empty vessel. The micro actions of self-care, the nourishing meal, the early night, the walk in true nature, the moment of gratitude, are not selfish. They are the maintenance of your own water source. You are becoming someone capable of sustaining connection because you are learning to sustain yourself. You are rebuilding the inner trust that you will not abandon your own needs, so you can engage with others from a place of wholeness, not desperate need. And finally, you must walk with grace as your guide. Grace is the unearned gift of a new beginning. It is the understanding that you will stumble on this path. You will send a text and get no reply. You will feel awkward. You will want to retreat back into the familiar silence. Grace allows you to say, "That attempt didn't work. I'll try a different way tomorrow." It allows you to forgive yourself for the drift, not as an excuse, but as a release from the shackles of shame that would keep you paralyzed. Grace is the soft ground that catches you when the old, hard pride would have let you fall. Reconnection is not a return to a past, idealized state. That is gone. The drift has changed the landscape forever. You are not walking back to the old dock. You are walking toward a new shore, where you will build something different, something wiser, something more resilient, because it knows the cost of neglect. You are weaving a new tapestry, but now you know the value of each thread, and you will not take the loom for granted. The journey from disconnection is the bravest journey you will ever make. It is the pilgrimage from I back to we. It begins with a single, humble step in the direction of the water. And with each step, the world will slowly come back into focus, not as a threat or a mirror of your lack, but as a living, breathing network of which you are a vital, inseparable part. The sound of the gentle stream grows stronger, merging with the sound of other streams, becoming a clear, flowing river. The footsteps are now walking on solid, grassy earth beside it. The sounds of life, birds, rustling leaves, distant human laughter, are full and rich. They blend into a harmonious, living soundscape. Our journey ends here, at the river's edge. The cost of disconnection is high. It is the erosion of trust, the disintegration of self, the desert of the spirit. But it is not the final word. The final word is written by the choice to turn, to walk, and to reach. It is written by the courage to say once more, with a heart both broken and hopeful, "Here I am. Let's begin again." The sound of two pairs of footsteps now, walking in sync beside the river. They slow and stop. There was a long, comfortable, connected silence, filled only with the sound of flowing water and shared breath. Then, a single, resonant, peaceful note rings out. The sound of a string, perfectly tuned, vibrating with clarity and connection. It holds and fades gently into silence.